had a site that was perfect for redevelopment or for some incentive or economic development plan, that's where we needed to focus. We had to use our assets. That's how you grow. And so, just because I'm a bull, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm only going to focus on the bulls. But I believe that we need to include the STEM programs. We need to work with more public-private partnerships. It's not just an issue of funding. There's also plenty of creative and great educational ways to improve our schools. So I would be well open-minded to a lot of different options.
Well, as a bull myself, I agree that we need more bulls in the Florida legislature. I was opposed to the idea of taking and creating a new university at a time when we are cutting funding for our public university system. So I was opposed to the idea of creating this new college, this new university, who is offering free education for the students who are going there. I think that one of the things that I could do in the legislature to take and bring more money to USF, and not only USF, but in the entire university system is that as an educator, people tend to listen to you when you're an educator, and I would be able to go on those committees and speak and talk about what I see. I'm in the college university system. I work at St. Leo University. I understand the funding for a university system, and I believe that we need to create more opportunities for funding and more scholarships. We need to increase the Bright Future scholarships and not keep cutting that down.
I can't believe I just heard people want more bull in the Florida legislature.
Well, we already got a whole lot of that anyway.
Mr. Burgess, back to a topic that just got touched on just momentarily. Both Senator John Legg and future House Speaker Richard Corcoran have ties to charter schools. In the 2013-14 school year, the Florida legislature appropriated more than $90 million in school construction to charter schools, and only $6 million to traditional public schools. Do you favor public construction dollars going to privately held charter schools? And will you vote to continue this trend if you're elected?
I think that's a good question, and let's give credit where credit is due. We have an example of a fantastic charter school right here in East Pasco at the Academy at the Farm. It's an A school. They're outperforming, and my sister Emily is a proud graduate of there, as well as a couple others that I see in the audience today. Charter schools are also tied to the school board, so they're not entirely private. Again, school choice. It's all about school choice to me. It's about an alternative. I grew up at Woodland Stewart, was Zephyr Hills High School, and I wouldn't change it for the world at all. I'm proud of that, and I received an amazing education from that. So it has nothing to do with taking away from public education. And I recognize funding is obviously the issue we're here to talk about on this part. Now, I would be happy to look into different funding options for different things. I think when it comes to public schools, one of the biggest pushes we need to make is our vocational programs. We need to work to have a better educated workforce straight out of high school. That way, we have folks that are licensed and certified. Thank you.
As I stated before, I think that public tax dollars needs to go to public schools. So I believe that that is an unfair balance when you're giving more money to charter schools without the accountability that your public school system has. Because let's go back and let's look at these charter schools. They can pick and they can choose the students that they have. And as a practical realist, let's also look at this. We talk about low-income students being able to go. You don't have to provide transportation. So how is a child in Wacoochee going to get to a school? For a practical standpoint, there is no way for them to get there. So I'm opposed to taking and using these PICO funds to build more schools and taking away from the public education system.
Ms. Ledbetter, staying on education. The Common Core standards, which have been named here as the Florida standards, are being criticized in some quarters as a federal government overreach. Please give us your position on the Florida standards and whether you agree with their implementation.
First off, the Florida standards, or Common Core, was designed by a group of governors who wanted some sort of standardized system. So in our mobile society, a student who goes from New York to Florida has a standardized type of curriculum. No teacher is opposed to standards. However, we are opposed to the implementation of how Common Core or Florida Core is being utilized. It's the amount of money that's being done in terms of testing. And we're turning our schools from centers of learning to centers of testing. $250 million we have spent on this. And Pearson controls the textbooks, they control the testing. There is no transparency for this. They control the GEDs, they control everything. That is something that I think that needs to be looked at. So it's the implementation and the testing of the Common Core that I'm opposed to.
Beverly and I are not far off on this issue at all. I have serious concerns about the implementation of Common Core. The standards are not inherently bad, and you're right, we have to have those standards to be able to adequately measure a child's progress and a good metric to see that. However, over-testing is certainly a problem. Curriculum choice should always be determined locally, in my opinion, because the standards of one place are not the standards of the other, and the needs of a classroom are best determined by the teachers who are in them. And I'm not in a classroom, so how can I sit up there and say, I think that this is how you should meet your goal? Because in the classroom, you know the needs of your student better than anybody. My biggest concern with education is one question, and I think it's the only question we should ask, and that's, are our children learning? Too often, education is politicized. It falls upon ideological lines, and we just need to make sure we're getting it right. It's not a Republican or a Democrat issue. It's about our children. It's the best interest of our children. I'm a new dad. I want my daughter to have the best education that she could possibly get. And I'm going to do whatever I have to do if I'm elected to ensure that she and future generations of students do. Because that's all that matters when it comes to education.
Mr. Burgess, I have a two-part energy question for you. The first part is, do you support drilling for oil in new near-shore waters off Florida? And two, you hear this all the time, Florida's a sunshine state, yet the state of New Jersey and even Germany has more of a solar footprint. What would you do to change that in Florida?
The answer to the drilling question is no. We're a tourism-driven state. That's our economy. That said, we need to pretend. That said, we don't need to pretend, thank you for clarifying, that we aren't surrounded by drilling. There's drilling off the coast of Cuba, there's drilling off of Texas, there's drilling off of Louisiana, and there's drilling off of Alabama, and the Obama administration recently approved drilling exploration off the east coast of Florida, among other states. So it's surrounding us. It's something we need to definitely take into consideration because we're directly affected by anything that might happen in those instances. So we have to have the appropriate provisions and measures put in place to be able to counteract any type of travesty that might happen like what happened in 2010. In terms of energy, we absolutely need to move to an all of the above strategy because in the state of Florida, we don't have ground wind. We have 155 cloudy days here in the state, so we can't just solely rely upon solar. We certainly need to move towards solar energy and use our renewable resources. However, it's all in how we do it. It's got to be gradual and it's got to be done right.
I agree. The state of Florida should not be drilling off the shore. We are a tourism state and we depend upon that money for budgeting and for our state. I'm also opposed to fracking. I think that is a dangerous procedure. We've seen some of the problems out west that has come about. One of the things that I would do about solar energy is this. I believe that we need to give incentives for people to take and use solar. And talking with Lacucci Electric, one of the things that I found out is that we have a lot of energy that's sitting out there, particularly in the Midwest, but we have no way to get that energy to places that need energy. So what we need to do is we need to invest in some infrastructure, particularly for these power transfer stations, to get energy where it is located to where we need to have energy. And we also don't need to drill off the coast of Florida because we have a huge amount of oil reserves. And so there is no need to take and endanger our fragile environment by taking and drilling off the coast.
Ms. Ledbetter, to follow up on this, the Commissioner of Agriculture agriculture says Florida needs another natural gas pipeline. Do you agree?
I'm concerned about safety. When we're looking at putting in natural gas lines, when we're talking about those types of things, that we need to make sure that we provide a safety system to make sure that we have no accidents. I'm not sure that in the state of Florida we need an additional natural gas pipeline through our state. So I would have a problem with that from an environmental standpoint.
I'm certainly not an expert on renewable energy and energy resources. There are certainly people who are, and I'm not afraid to go to them and to ask the questions that need to be asked when they need to be asked. That said, we do need to transition towards renewable resources. We are heavily reliant upon natural gas. I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily for or against that at this time. There's certainly more information that I would want to discover and things that I would like to hear before I could make an educated decision on that. However, as we continue to transition towards renewable resources such as wind and solar, we need to wean ourselves off of coal and natural gas and other types of energy resources. So, I don't know how that fits into that balance. It may not. So, at this time, I certainly would defer to the experts and want to make more of an educated decision before I would agree or disagree.
Mr. You have said that as a guiding principle of yours, you believe that the freer the market, the better, and that you are opposed to government placing unproductive and cumbersome taxing and regulatory policy burdens on private industry. Can you just give us an example of one cumbersome tax or regulatory policy that you might seek to repeal if you're elected?
The long-standing existence of the commercial lease tax. We are the only state in the nation that has this. And you better believe that it's factored into consideration when companies and businesses and corporations are considering where to locate their central hub. And so that's certainly one that I believe should be looked into, and where we can should be eliminated, because that stands in the way of economic development and growth.
I agree on that. I met with the Commercial Real Estate Board and spoke to them about this particular problem, that we are the only group, the only state, and this is a holdback when we are trying to take and bring new businesses in here. But to say that we should not have regulation on businesses, if we didn't have regulation on businesses, we wouldn't have the 40-hour work week, we wouldn't have minimum wage, we wouldn't have a lot of things that protect the workers. So to me, there are certain things, particularly safety issues, that I think are rather important and that we need to look at. However, I also think that our state needs to look at the regulations that we have, and we need to take and see whether those regulations are actually working or whether they are harmful to small businesses. And I'm a very strong proponent of small businesses. We own a family small business, so I understand from the business point of view the regulations that can be on a business.
Ms. Ledbetter, back to education. Florida's school superintendents have asked for a reprieve from the next round of standardized tests in Florida, saying the district's technology capabilities are not strong enough to achieve the goal of online testing. Would you advocate on behalf of the school superintendents, or would you follow the lead of the state education commissioner, who more or less said, tough, do it anyway?
I would support, and when I received this letter saying that I was endorsed by the Florida Association of School Administrators as a building rep for many, many years, I thought that was rather unique that they would recognize this. Pearson spent $15 million in fines last year because they were not ready for the testing. I talked to some teachers today at lunch and found out that the last 9 weeks of school, there will be one test after the other. So your students, your children are losing 9 weeks of instruction so that they can be tested. We do not have the infrastructure for this. And when you have every student in every school across this entire state taking a test, you're bound to have failures, and that has been a real problem. So I support a moratorium on this, and I also support eliminating many of these tests that we have that are unnecessary.
As an officer in the military, one of the first things you learn to do is listen from your soldiers on the front line, like your sergeants. They're the backbone of the Army. And as a captain in the Army that's only been in for 2 years, I certainly can't pretend to know more than what I do. Same can be said for our school superintendents who are on the front lines with our educators. And up in Tallahassee, we need to listen if something's not working. I'm proud to be endorsed by our excellent superintendent, Kirk Browning. And if he tells me he has concerns about our education system and the over-testing and the burden that's causing in the classrooms, you better believe I'm going to listen. The people that I've interacted with, both at the city council and as mayor of the city of Zephyr Hills, know that I pride myself in listening more than I speak because God gave me 2 ears and 1 mouth. And I will continue to take that to Tallahassee, especially when it comes to issues of education, because as I said before, the only thing that matters when it comes to education is, are our children learning?
Mr. Burgess, 3 sessions ago, the Florida legislature essentially gutted the Growth Management Act and also the State Department of Community Affairs. Do you believe that the state needs to have a role in growth management again, or should it be left to local communities?
I think there's a balancing act you strike in anything that you do, but my perspective is a local perspective. I think that's a great question, because I've seen firsthand how our local governments, our local chambers, and our local economic development councils, both at the Pasco Economic Development Council and newly formed Zephyr Hills Economic Development Coalition, make things happen. I was involved in all of them when I was a mayor. And they are the boots on the ground. They have the best interest of their community at heart. And I believe that they set the demand, and the state then serves as a clearinghouse for things as incentives, because you need to listen to those who are in that community, who know best what their assets and infrastructure is like, and where they could promote an Amazon, where they could promote an Olive Garden or a Hobby Lobby. That's how you get it done. We did that in Zephyr Hills. We tried to attract Amazon. We tried to attract an Olive Garden. We did get a Hobby Lobby. Something we're so proud of. So our local government set that demand. They promote growth management, and as the city councilman, growth management was a huge concern of mine, and something that I voted against several developments because I just didn't feel like we had the adequate infrastructure in place.
Not only has the state gutted the growth management, but one of the other concerns that people have is that they've also gutted the water management system that we have here, which was a regional approach. So I think that we need to go back and we need to readdress those particular items. I think that we also need to have some sort of regulation and some sort of regional cooperation when we're taking and we're building and we're looking at growth. Because one area's growth impacts another area's growth. And so there needs to be some sort of a regional organization to look at growth and to manage growth. You know, Florida is a state that is growing. Our area, our region is growing. And there needs to be that cooperation between the counties and between the regions so that we make sure that the infrastructure is there to manage this particular growth.
Mrs. Ledbetter, do you believe that term limits in the Florida legislature have been good, bad, or had no impact at all, and do you support them?
My husband and I disagree on this. One of many things. I support term limits, and here's the reason why. Once you get into office, we notice how difficult it is to get someone out because they have made many, many connections and they're well funded. And it's very difficult to take and run against an incumbent. By having term limits, you allow the people, when people's ideas change, when the mood changes of an area, you allow to have new voices into the legislature or into government, whatever kind of level that you're speaking about. So I'm in favor of term limits because it gives people a chance to take and compete competitively in a race. We have an open seat here because we have term limits. And it's going to have a chance to have a fresh voice in the legislature representing the people of our district.
I think term limits serve a positive purpose. I mean, we all see what can happen up in the federal government with no term limits. That said, you know, sometimes I think maybe because you do hear both sides of this issue, I think that the counter side to that argument would probably be that with term limits, it almost prevents you from being able to get a firm grasp around a lot of these very complicated issues, because believe you me, none of us know everything. I think we both would admit that. And the people up in Tallahassee would say the same thing, because these are complicated issues we're dealing with. That said, I am in support of the 8-year term limits for all the reasons that Beverly stated. I think that they keep us grounded, they remind us where we came from and why we are doing this from the get-go, and help you to never lose focus of what public service is really all about.
Mr. Burgess, I've asked you this before, but I'm going to ask you again for public consumption. Your campaign literature says you're running as a conservative, which to many people means smaller government. And if you're a true conservative, why would you advocate for the city of Zephyrhills to keep the position of mayor, since they have no vote on council but draw a public salary?
This is certainly something that you and I have discussed on a number of occasions, and I know we disagree on it, CT. But I have seen firsthand, I lived it for a year. I saw how effective the mayor of Zephyrhills can be working together with the city government and our city council. He or she may not have a vote, but that mayor has a veto. And that's a checks and balance system that you can't afford to lose. It's important. I talked about the veto in my term as mayor. It was something that was discussed, and I believe it had a positive impact upon a decision that was made. It was regarding our budget, one of the most important issues we deal with at the city level. The position of mayor is far more than ceremonial. We advocated and pushed for the saving of the Jeffries House, which is the most historical home in our city and our founder's house. And not only is that house now going to serve as a heart and soul of our community for future generations, it is also going to help redevelop and promote economic development in downtown. It's a win-win, and it's the position of mayor that played an important role in that, along with the city council. So, thank you. I could go on and on about that.
You can have a crack at it if you want.
I suppose if I had to describe myself, I would say that I'm a practical realist. And so when I look at things, I look at how is it practical and how is it realistic that it's going to happen. And as to the mayor of Zephyrhills, I think that is something that the people of Zephyrhills need to decide. That's not something that the state needs to decide. And if the people of Zephyrhills want a mayor, then that is their decision and they should have a mayor.
Okay, I'm turning to questions from the audience now. Ms. Ledbetter, I believe so. When elected, what would be your very first priority when you get to Tallahassee?
Working with those people who have changed their mind and have decided that the Democrats were correct all along and repeal the nuclear recovery fee.
We agree. I think, not entirely, but we agree on the point. We agree that the nuclear cost recovery should be one of the biggest issues and the first thing that gets done, that we repeal and refund that so the state can move forward and that we can start to protect our consumers and those who are being fleeced by utility companies that are taking advantage of them, like Duke Energy.
Mrs. Ledbetter, I'm sure that you're well aware of the lawsuit that resulted in the circuit judge in Leon County striking part of Florida's redistricting plan. Do you think the time has come for redistricting to be taken out of the legislature's hands and maybe put into the hands of a, if you can find one, bipartisan commission or nonpartisan commission or an outside group, not mayor politician?
I supported the Fair Districting Act, and one of the activities that my students did as an AP class and as a teacher is we actually looked at how one could redistrict, and it is a very difficult process to take and do. I think it needs to come out of the hands of politicians whose very livelihood, whose election is determined by where those lines are drawn. And there are some really strange lines if you've looked in the state of Florida to see where they're given. So I would be a proponent of taking and actually spending some money and hiring a group, an outside group, to draw this line. However, I still think that the legislature has a role in approving, along with the court, approving those lines. They have to meet, that they have to be contiguous, they have to have a balance in the number of people that are in there, and they have to take and recognize existing county lines.
The legislature and the court system needs to play a role in this, and if you don't feel that they are, and you feel that they're being unfair or biased based upon their political ideology or their re-election campaign, then you need to unelect them. And that's why there's elections, and that's why there's term limits, and that's why you have the power of the vote.
Mr. Burgess, we've talked a lot tonight about important statewide issues, but looking at District 38 as a whole, from east to west, north to south, what do you see as the most pressing issue to constituents?
There are definitely quite a few issues here within District 38. I would say one of the biggest ones is economic development. That impacts not only East Pasco or Pasco County, it impacts the Tampa Bay region. What's happening in Wesley Chapel is going to affect Zephyr Hills, Dade City, San Antonio, and all the surrounding communities, let alone the county as a whole and the region as a whole. So we need to continue to promote economic development. An excellent example of that was our state delegation meeting with local minds and local governments in the city of Zephyr Hills played an integral role in this in helping to get the DOT to expand State Road 56 all the way to 301, which opens up the corridor to our airport. The opportunities and the positives to that are boundless. And that's an example of when government's working together and everybody's moving in the right direction, no pun intended, and doing the right thing for home. Economic development is so important. We need to create a better educated workforce, and I think by doing that, we need to promote vocational schools. We need to look at the needs of our community, and we need to see what jobs are out there, because as mayor, one of the biggest things I would hear from our employers was that they're having a hard time hiring from within. And so we need to ensure that students who are college bound, because not everybody is, nor should everybody be expected to be, are armed with a certification saying you're qualified for this job and becoming a productive member of our community and promoting our economy at the same time.
East Pasco County has a 33% poverty level. We are the highest in Pasco County. So the main concern is going to be jobs. That is something that people need. A couple of things that we can do that are important to take and create those jobs is, number one, we need to form partnerships with union apprenticeship programs. I went down and I toured several apprenticeship programs in Tampa, and they are working with the Hillsborough County school system. We need to get involved in that, and we have to provide transportation for these citizens to be able to take and get involved in those. They pay good jobs. The second thing that we need to do is we need to change the perception of East Pasco County. Because let's be blunt, when you think of Zephyr Hills, you think of retirees. When you think of Dade City, you think of antique shops. We don't think of the great people that we have here and the workforce that we have here. So we need to change that perception. We need to make sure that Pasco County is part of those strategic site inventories so that when people from out of state, companies who are looking to relocate, they think of Pasco County and they come here. I think that is important to take and do.
This will be the last question, and then we'll move into closing statements. And this is from the audience. I think it's Ms. Ledbetter. Would you support removing Florida's ban on same-sex marriages?
I support the Constitution, and I believe that the Constitution in the 14th Amendment, the Due Process Clause, indicates that people have a right to privacy. We also have in this country an idea of fairness, and I believe that it is discriminatory not to allow people to marry whom they wish. I think that churches have the right, because I believe in the separation of church and state, I believe that churches have the right to say no, that they do not wish to take and perform a ceremony of same sex. But I think as a government who issues the license, we need to recognize the rights of those people.
The voters spoke when the amendment was passed, and certainly we know what's going on now, and it's going through the court system, so we'll wait to hear what the Florida Supreme Court has to say when they make a ruling on this, if they do. And that said, I support traditional marriage. I supported the amendment, and I'm a supporter of traditional marriage, so I still do support the amendment.
Final statements, Ms. Ledbetter. Oh, I beg your pardon. Mr. Burgess.
Look, thank you all for being here tonight. This has been truly exciting and a great experience. And I think both Beverly and I would agree that the opportunity to speak with you all is just fantastic. It's a chance for these issues to be heard. It's also a chance for us to hear about the important issues that are on your mind, because I said it before, you can't be an expert on everything. You can't know every issue that's going to come your way. And so it's up to you, the voters and the citizens, to inform us of those so that we're not missing the boat on something that could be equally as important as something else that we thought was. Thank you to our moderators, to our timekeeper, to the chambers of commerce, to all the members of the community that are in here. Thank you so much to my family, to my wife, to my little baby, who, I don't know if she's still here, but oh, she's in the back. She's been so quiet, good girl. She certainly has been to more political functions than any 9-month-old should have to. But you've heard two candidates that do have some differing views, but I think that we have one overarching thing in common, is that we love East Pasco. This is our home. We both have strong vested interest in this community, and I think that's something so special that you as voters get to choose between. You may have your ideology, you may have your beliefs, but we both love this place, and we're both just trying to do the right thing. We may have different ways at looking at how to get there, but that's a beautiful thing for you to be able to decide. I've served my community at the local level. I've helped balance budgets. I've made decisions as an elected official and been held accountable in the past. I have been elected 3 times, and I have never failed the people of Zephyr Hills, and I won't fail the people of East Pasco, because this is home. This is the place that my little girl is going to be born and raised in. She's going to go to hopefully the schools that I went to and get to go hang out at the small businesses that I was able to, go to the theaters, the bowling alleys. And I'm going to do whatever I can in my power to represent you, not special interests, because I need to be able to come back home to my community, the people that put me in Tallahassee if I am elected, and be able to look you in the eye and be able to tell you that I made the right decisions that I knew were best for you, and that's all that matters to me. So thank you for your time, and I would appreciate your vote on November 4th.
Well, it has been a long road. Danny and I have traveled a great deal together. We both found out that we are better suited, and we're not going to give up our day jobs to milk cows, correct? We were not very good at that at the county fair. I do want to thank everybody for coming tonight and supporting us. I think this is important for democracy, for people to learn about the candidates. And I particularly want to thank the Tampa Bay Times. I told them I have to get this one later for the endorsement that I received. I believe that Florida can do better. I believe in a Florida with clean air and clean water and a protected environment. I believe in a level playing field for all of its citizens, and I believe that that is important for Florida to take and make sure that every person is respected and treated with dignity. I believe in a Florida that takes and values the work of a worker, and that labor is recognized as an important part of our economy. And I believe in a Florida in which our children are viewed as more than just the results of a test. And if you believe, as I believe, that in order to change the direction of the state of Florida, that we need to change the Florida legislature, then I ask you to support my campaign. My name is Beverly Ledbetter, and I'm running for the Florida House, District 38, because I believe the Florida House can be